Hello, this is Andrew Katinsky. Today I'll be presenting for my Spring Advanced Network Security 601 class a explanation of the CVSS score calculations and some considerations using the CVSS score in your own day-to-day world. So what exactly is the CVSS score? The CVSS is an acronym for Common Vulnerability Scoring System. It was actually first designed and managed by the first CVSS SIG, the Forum of Incident Response and Security Teams Special Interest Group. It was kind of designed as a universal way to convey the vulnerability severity and help determine the urgency and priority of the responses. Basically, in short, the idea was it was designed to help standardize the way people looked at vulnerabilities to kind of get away from some of the vendor biases or individual biases that may occur for different vulnerabilities for different reasons. So what they presented was a set of metrics and formulas to make these calculations, and since version 2 and 3, they've actually created calculators online where we can go online, input the metrics in for the vulnerabilities, and kind of help determine what the CVSS score is as it pertains to the environment and your environment in particular. Again, it solves the problem of multiple incompatible scoring systems. Ultimately, the CVSS score is fed by things like the National Vulnerability Database, a lot of common systems that are using event data, CVE scoring, like vulnerability assessment tools like Tenable, Rapid7, various web application scanners, AppSpider, Burp, and different manufacturers coming up with different types of, say, SIMs, security information event managers. And by creating kind of a common framework for these scores to be done, it helps more easily identify the threat levels associated with the different events that may be occurring or vulnerabilities discovered on your particular network. Basically, it keeps from a vendor from finding a vulnerability in their system from downplaying the vulnerability. The other side, competitors of increasing a vulnerability score based on some purely in-house, metrics that they might have come up with. The standard was kind of developed to be open, usable, and understandable by anyone. The goal was to be able to make this environment so that it could be modified, reviewed, and adjusted as time goes on, and as people discovered better ways to do the calculations or more impactful methods of discovering how the metrics are discovered. All right. So the different versions. So currently we're on CVSS version 3, and versions 2 and versions 3 are actually commonly used today, and they're both used in the National Vulnerability Database. If you were to look up something in the NVD database, you would see actually a scoring system for the CVSS 2 and CVSS 3. Back in February 2005, the first version of the CVSS was introduced. It was actually kind of small, quick, to the point. It wasn't a lot of peer review. And once it came out, it was open to a lot of scrutiny. And very quickly, they began working on the next revision of the CVSS. About 2 years later, the CVSS version 2 came out in June of 2007. And that was officially released, providing metrics. And the main focus of this was on how to categorize low, medium, and high vulnerabilities. When the version 3 was released in 2015, it actually left for more scoring capabilities. So it's no longer just a 3-point scaling system. So there's everything from no vulnerability up to critical vulnerability, using 5 gradients in between as it breaks up the CVSS score of 10. So, like I said earlier, until the CVSS score was developed, vendors used to report vulnerabilities and threats, and they kind of used their own way of interpreting those threats. If you were using common aggregators or systems that were using to determine what the actual threat level to your environment was, it actually made for a lot of uncommon results if you had disparate systems reporting on similar vulnerabilities. The metrics and the equations in the CVS were designed to be reasonably complete, accurate, easy to use. That just means that they're well defined. They've taken input from the various members of the user group, special interest group, and they've done a lot of testing in the real world to determine where they felt these threats and vulnerabilities lie. If you would actually compare results in version 2 and version 3, they're relatively close, but typically the scoring on the CVSS 2 would show it as a higher risk than it would in the CVSS version 3. If you wanted to go through the calculations yourself and look at the calculator, there is an online calculator on first.org at the URL below, and it'll basically walk you through filling in the blanks. Basically, the CVSS is made up of 3 metric groups. The base metric group are the ones that are required in every single instance. By assigning a value to all of these metrics gives you your base score. The other 2 environmental metrics in the temporal metric groups, those are both optional. By adding values to those particular categories helps solidify the score, in particularly as it pertains to your environment. Let me go through each groups quickly for you. The CVSS version 3 vulnerabilities, the base scores basically lay out this way, and these are screenshot examples of what your metrics look like if you go into the calculator and look at these particular things. So things like the attack vector, how is the attack being done, the attack complexity, are there privileges required, or is this something that doesn't require privileges? Does it require user interaction? Does somebody have to be on the network exploiting it or not? Then there's the things like the typical CIA impacts to your environment or the environment as a whole. The temporal metrics, it kind of reflects the characteristics of the vulnerability that may change over time, but not across user environments. For example, the presence of a simple-to-use exploit kit would increase the CVSS score, while the creation of a patch would actually decrease the score. The environmental metrics groups presents the characteristics of a vulnerability that is relevant and unique to a particular user's environment. These metrics, along with the scoring analysis to incorporate security controls, which may migrate any consequences, as well as promote or demote the importance of vulnerability scores according to their business risk. These CIA vulnerability assignments for your internal environment actually are quite important if you're trying to determine the best way to look at how a CVSS score will impact your individual environment. Obviously, increasing the confidentiality requirement or the availability requirement or lowering it will make a difference in the overall scoring and your personal business risk. The things to consider: knowing your environment helps you get a more accurate score assessment. Like I mentioned, the CIAs will help determine the actions needed for your particular environment. If you take into consideration things like the data located on a particular machine, does the machine contain sensitive data, or does it contain just normal day-to-day, nothingness? Network exposure, is it inside an enclave protected by a firewall, or is the device exposed to the internet? What else is in that particular enclave? Is a device inside an enclave where it may not hold a lot of sensitive data, but by virtue of its network connectivity may be able to compromise 1 or 2 hops into your network? A lot of modern vulnerability scanners will actually allow you to assign this risk during the initial CVSS score. If you look at something like Rapid7, for instance, if you're scanning your PCI assets or HIPAA assets, and you assign them higher CIA values, for instance, in PCI, availability is not a requirement. because obviously if a system is not available, there's no risk to the credit card exposure, but the confidentiality and the integrity of those systems is quite high. So scoring them appropriately will help determine what the score is based on what vulnerabilities might be discovered in a box. The other consideration might be, is that box less accessible from the network or more accessible from the network? If it's your web page that's accepting credit cards and you're storing the credit card data on that site, it might be more score higher based on the criteria. Or if you have a back-end database that's secured more further back, you need to take that into consideration when you're doing your scoring as well. So, all right, I appreciate you listening to me ramble on a little bit. I'm kind of fighting a cold and trying to get through this at the same time, so I do apologize for the rough voice and the abruptness and maybe scatterbrainness of the presentation. But these links, following them, they'll give you the information that you're looking for if you wanted to implement this program in your own environment. Again, thank you very much and have a great day.